Welcome to Radio Bar, Lee Cronin, director of Evil Dead Rise and The Mummy. Thank you so much for allowing me to interview you.
My absolute pleasure. Nice to join you.
I would have it with me, but I'm actually in the house my girlfriend just bought, so I can't show it off. But I have a copy. I just got the copy of the Arrow release of Evil Dead Rise. Fantastic.
Oh, very nice. I'm actually my copies of it have are sitting in my office in Dublin. I haven't had an opportunity to collect them yet, but it was fun to collaborate with them and provide a bunch of additional kind of personal behind the scenes stuff. So there's some great extras on there.
Awesome. I think you got to tilt your camera down just a
Sorry.
little. Yeah, yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's a little bit more center. Perfect. But hey, let's definitely talk about the Mummy. I have seen every major Mummy film probably in existence, including some really really crappy ones like Robot versus Aztec Mummy, an old MST3K film. Christopher Lee's Mummy and Boris Karloff's, obviously. Clearly, of course, the Brendan Fraser mummies, which for everyone who's not aware, Brendan Fraser is not in Lee Cronin's The Mummy,
This is correct.
which I don't
This
know
is
if you've
correct.
seen. That is a very popular internet thing going around right now.
It sure is. Yeah, it's caught light. I've seen it out there, but it is correct information.
What made you want to make a truly terrifying mummy movie? Because this looks like it's a true horror film of terrifying proportions. I don't think there's been a mummy movie like that. Boris Karloff's film was frightening back in the day, but
I think for the very reason that you've just stated, I wanted to make a terrifying movie about a classic monster interpreted in a different way, and I felt like it hadn't been done before. And it felt like a great opportunity as a storyteller to bring something new to that expanded cinematic universe, which has been nearly as old as cinema history itself. So it felt like a great opportunity to plant a flag and do something kind of fresh.
when you decided to start working on this project, where did you pull your mythology and lore from? Is it strictly Egyptian, or did you really do some research into
Yeah,
mummifications and
yeah,
Egyptian?
yeah. Like I always kind of start broad. I always knew that I wanted it to be based on Egyptian mythology and the concept of that form of mummification. But what I also attracted me to it, or was part of the development of the story, was a concept of mummification for a different purpose. So when we think of many, many mummy movies, or even just think about the concept of mummies that we see in a museum or something that we read about in a book, it's often connected to the pharaohs, the royalty, the kings, the queens. And I liked the idea of mummification for maybe mummification to a loved one or the person that lives around the corner. What would that be like if it happened to the average Joe? And why actually, more importantly, as a storyteller, it's always, well, why? And that allowed me to start to develop my own lore, but also paying attention to the concept as well of, something that is buried and, wasn't meant to be found or unearthed, and which now sits in museums and forms part of historical culture. And I kind of thought, well, what if there's a different reason? What if there's a different type? But within my research, again, kind of going back to the well, returning to museums, getting inspiration when it comes to how these bodies were bound and the textures and the detail and the text and the language and all of those things played a part in building up my movie Mummy.
I noticed in your films is you are a big practical effects person, and I definitely get to learn a lot about that from like the Evil Dead Rise behind the scenes bonus features and stuff. Do you hope that the world gets back into more practical effects as filmmakers go on, or do you think CGI is just going to continue taking over more and more?
I think CGI forms a very important part of every filmmaker's arsenal. It's just about, I suppose, what your sensibilities and taste are. I think for monsters, however they look, whether they look incredible or you're on a low budget and they don't look as amazing as you want them to, I'm still a fan of putting something real into the space with the actors. I think that that's part of who I am as a filmmaker. And obviously, on this movie, very, very like had an incredible team of people that I could work with to actually create a very visually arresting monster for this film, a monster that has to evolve during the story and kind of reveal itself. I think for me, like again, I'm also a huge fan of using CGI, but I use it to refine ideas that I have, not to define them. So, if I need to extend a piece of desert or help with a particular element of somebody's eye or whatever, I'll use CGI, but it's always off something that's really there. There's not really many shots, if any, I've ever created in my work that are just like fully CGI. It's always built off something that's real. And we use very little in the way of green or blue screen in this movie. It's a very grounded, practical, and kind of tactile film. And then in terms of will it continue to take over, I think again it just comes down to the filmmakers and how we can try and impress audiences with all of our different tricks. But I know for me, I'm always interested in exploring practical until I can't make it work, and then figuring out how other methodologies can support the ideas that I want to put on screen.
Who came up with the idea first to do this kind of film? Was it you or Blumhouse? Did you like after you did Rise be like, I want to make a mummy movie? There's not enough mummy movies out there.
It's it definitely wasn't me going, I have a burning desire to make a mummy movie. Evil Dead was different for me because I always had this want to make an Evil Dead film, and I've talked about that before, and was very blessed to have that opportunity. To reinvent that world and come about it from my point of view. It kind of started with, again, when you make a film that people really like and then people you respect want to have conversations about, it's always the question, what are you going to do next? And I was developing some different ideas that I was very passionate about, and I had a conversation with James Wan, and we were talking about mummy movies, and he kind of said to me, imagine like a really, what about a really terrifying one, like a horror movie? Like, what would you do, Lee? And that's always a cool question to be asked as a storyteller, like what would you do? And I kind of was like, well, wait a minute, we haven't seen a really one that's kind of horror led and is kind of like fun and spectacular, but in a more terrifying way, I suppose, than adventure. Um, and and that question kind of got my brain moving, but also always begin in a place where I'm thinking about character first and what the story is. I've always got a back pocket full of crazy, scary ideas and tricks that I want to play and things I would like to put on screen, but I had to find a really good story. And once I had a set of characters and a set of circumstances revolving around the fact that this girl goes missing and is returned, and there's a connection between her and mummies and mummification, then I felt like we were kind of onto something new.
I don't know if you ever heard of these before. Have you ever heard of the 48-hour film project?
I have indeed, yeah, I have heard. I know there's a few different versions of it. I don't know if you're talking about a specific kind of the specific one.
I made a film for the 48-hour film project called A Mummy Among Us.
Ah,
And in it,
nice.
a couple people find a mummy like washed ashore and they bring her back to life.
I love it.
And she experiences the real world of technology and stuff, but realizes it's too much for her. So she wants to go back into her mummification.
It's like Mummy meets California Man or Encino Man. Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever
And
you want
what
to call
we didn't know is that where we were shooting it is down the stream from the Rhode Island nuclear plant. And in several shots of the beach, you can see the Rhode Island nuclear power station in the background. So we we kind of wrote that in as the nuclear power probably brought the mummy back to life.
the radioactive mummy. I love that. I'll have to check it out.
You can find it on YouTube somewhere. What out of all of the various mummy films that have come out, what is your favorite?
Probably Bubba Hotep.
Yes, the Bruce Campbell.
I would say, yeah. And that's long before I worked with the guys. Bubba Hotep
Yeah, I was
was
gonna say, wait a minute. Are you saying that because of the Evil
no,
Dead?
no, that was one me and some of my film school friends really enjoyed watching. It was really good. And I also love the original Karloff one as well because it just plays around with the uncanny. It's quite creepy. Um, but yeah, I think as you said at the start, they come in many shapes and sizes. And there's quite a variety there. Like the Hammer ones are also super effective and entertaining. And I think what's fun is that people can look at this movie monster and dip in and actually have these different types of stories that are told by and via the unearthing of something ancient.
I heard, I don't know if this is true or not, so you can say or yes or no. I heard a rumor that this was going to be retitled because Universal announced that they're going to be doing the Brendan Fraser film. Is that true?
No, not true at all. Unfortunately, when before a movie is released, there's always rumors and rumblings about certain things. And I think the thing that always needs to be remembered is that making of movies often have code words as well, to protect what the film is itself. And this movie had more than one code word when it was being discussed and in production and stuff like that. And I guess at one point in time, somebody found something out and put two and two together and got five.
Lee, talk about the casting for the film.
So I knew in approaching this film that I wanted to have a very authentic, identifiable family. It's also a multicultural family and actually a very multicultural cast across the movie. We've got Egyptians, we've got Americans, we've got Mexicans, and the most important thing to me was finding actors that you could fall in love with when they played these characters. So with the parents in the movie, with Jack Rayner and Laia Costa, I was really drawn to them because of their naturalistic abilities, and their ability to really share emotion, and to be very identifiable. Veronica Falcone, who plays the grandmother in the story, Carmen, also just brought. I wanted a certain kind of grandeur and levity and humor to her, which is something that she did an incredible job with. And then some incredible Egyptian actors with our two Mays, May Calamawy and May El Ghedi as well, who brought something, again, just a great authenticity to the role. I think authenticity was the most important thing. And then obviously Natalie Grace, who plays Katie and our monster, a really big moment for her, a real breakthrough moment, who just brought endless fortitude and energy. So I think when you're casting, I said you're looking for the right person to embody the character, but also someone with the right energy, to take on the challenge of the type of movie that you're trying to create.
You seem to have your foot in the horror genre. Have you always wanted to be a horror director, or do you want to branch off and do other things?
I think I'm just really excited about making movies, and I love the genre space, but I wouldn't necessarily limit myself to specifically dead center within the horror genre. I think to date, my three movies, whilst there's similar aspects to each one, part of my voice, all play around in a slightly different place. Hole in the Ground is very psychological. Evil Dead is obviously very contained and very specifically intense for a period of time. This movie brings in more drama amongst the family, and quite a big detective story as well. But my interests lie throughout the genre. I'd love to make Saving Private Ryan, but I think there'll always be some genre quality to what I do. There might often be a ghost or a monster or something evil, but sometimes it might just be playing the chords of tension within a story. But I am a genre filmmaker because I think those type of movies allow you to connect with an audience and also to hit the big screen, which is where I always want to try and be.
Call this film, I read a combination of Poltergeist and Seven, like a detective story involving the supernatural.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
something I don't think gets played with that often, and sometimes not always successful, and sometimes it's very successful. Like most recent Hellraiser movie was definitely a detective kind of supernatural story, or the Ninth Gate, Johnny Depp.
Great movie, The Ninth Gate. Yeah, yeah. I think it's something we haven't seen
Oh
that.
God, yeah.
Yeah, it feels like something we haven't seen that much of in recent times. And for me, it was like, again, I love, Seven and Silence of the Lambs are movies that I love, and to me, they're very much horror movies as well, even though the monsters within them are human. Um, and I, having made my previous film with Evil Dead Rise, I just wanted to expand the storytelling space really, and to be able to dig in a little bit deeper. And I knew I wanted with this story to bring a mummy home and bring a mummy out of its typical place and bring it into a family home. Um, but at the same time, I still wanted there to be connectivity back to Egypt, and there's a great investigative angle that kind of takes place. And the Seven meets Poltergeist is really just some of the dark kind of body terror and the dark corners where things exist and lurk. And then the poltergeist aspect is that domestic setting and the heart of the family, and also the want to be reunited with a loved one.
You sound like you're definitely a cinephile yourself.
I
I
try
mean,
my best.
working
I
in the
try my
place
best.
that Lawrence of Arabia, Working in the place that Lawrence of Arabia, Indiana Jones, and Last Crusade were filmed, that must have been your inner geek just must have been exploding in your head.
It was great shooting in Almeria in Spain, which is such a historical place for movies. Obviously, going back to Sergio Leone and the spaghetti westerns as well, that were shot out there, and then and the movies that you mentioned also. It was actually funny because there's a scene in the movie where the two parents share a hug, in the courtyard of a hospital. And it actually, I was looking at a lot of locations at the time, and location scouting can be very exhausting, and you're very busy and you're trying to cover a lot of ground. It wasn't until after I'd selected that location that I realized it was a very specific spot that is in Last Crusade. It wasn't it wasn't until after the fact. And then yes, my inner geek definitely enjoyed understanding that. But it is cool, and there's a couple of nice Easter eggs in the movie relating to the history of movies that have been there. There's a little pizza joint that's called Leone's Pizza in the film.
Brown is a fantastic movie that more people should go see or hunt down and stream.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Great film. Um, one of the things I don't think ever gets talked about enough is sometimes the art designers of their films, and it definitely seems like from the trailers I've seen, this film has a heavy amount of art design to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a hugely detail oriented filmmaker. And I worked with Nick Bassett and his team and a great team in Ireland on the design of this movie. Nick had worked on Evil Dead Rise, and without doubt, I wanted him back, and also my director of photography, Dave Garbett, as well from the previous movie. In fact, most of the key players from my last movie were back in the saddle because they really delivered on the vision that I had. And myself and Nick, we question everything. Like even bringing it back to location scouting, we'll go and look at locations we know aren't suitable or may not be what we're looking for because we might learn something from there. We might spot an interesting texture or an interesting way that somebody decorates their home. But I think with the design, I'm always looking for like layers of history and real character um to bring to the scene because that's how the real world feels. I don't particularly like overly sterile movies. I like when they have a really deep texture and a real sense of history.
In this movie is done by Stephen McCune. The music from the Evil Dead Rise gave me chills in an atmosphere, and I think I pre-ordered I think I have it on vinyl because I think the score came out on vinyl for that film. How is the music here in The Mummy?
Yeah, it's great myself and Stephen have collaborated on three movies together now. And it was brilliant to work with him again on this. I think one of the things we talked about with this film was the concept that something is coming the entire time. There's an evil presence, but it needs to develop and find its strength. So we always wanted there to be sounds that were suggestive of that. At times, we wanted quite a sparse score as well because we wanted to allow a lot of space for the character of the house to come through and sound design and that environment. And then also we talked a lot and used a lot of sounds that were and like through using strange sounds as music um that played into the idea of something under pressure, something creaking and cracking and breaking open. And we would say like stretching. We have a lot of stretching sounds in it because there's a lot of elements related to like bindings and skin and unwrapping. And we wanted to capture the essence of that through the music in the movie.
People love our collectors of horror memorabilia and horror things. Are you a collector of anything? Just curious.
I am a dreadful collector of many things. When I say dreadful, like I collect a lot of stuff. I too love collecting memorabilia. Like again, the kid that dreamed of making movies and hung out in the video store and would try and put his name on standees to try and fit into his bedroom. It is a real kick to be able to collect things from your own work. It's a really nice kind of history and of the things that you've worked on. I also love when people create fan art is great as well. Not just for the stuff that I do, but really cool fan art for movies that I love. And I'm also a little bit of an obsessive over mid-century modern furniture. So I always have to watch myself that I don't buy too much.
I was also curious who got to keep the record from the Evil Dead Rise.
I have one of those in storage. It's not in my collection yet, but I do have one. I have a bunch of cool stuff from Evil Dead Rise. What I do have from this movie sitting in the hallway of my house, still awaiting a permanent home, is the sarcophagus, which I think my plan is to turn it into a guest bed.
Oh, that is awesome. Did I don't know if you saw like a couple of years ago when the Nosferatu movie was out, CBS allowed you to order the actual coffin from the Nosferatu movie if you had $20,000.
I remember seeing that as I remember seeing that and thinking it was awesome.
Well, if you ever come to out to Massachusetts, in Salem, Massachusetts, there's a museum called Counterlux Nightmare Gallery. They have one.
Oh, fantastic. I like that tip.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, definitely stop by there. There's some stuff in there that you might really enjoy, trust me, as a horror fan.
I love that.
Well, Lee, thank you so much for coming on the show to talk a little bit about The Mummy, which comes out next weekend. I believe it's I don't have the exact date. I don't have my calendar open. The
April
17th,
17th.
correct?
Yeah, April
Yep.
17th. It's going to
Yep.
be in theaters all around the world, and you can go see it in IMAX. You can go see it in 4DX. You can go and see it in a grungy little theater. It's there for you to enjoy. Jump onto the kind of crazy train that myself and my team have created, and we'll scare you and we'll entertain you. That's a promise.
Absolutely. I want to go see it in theaters. I want to jump. I want to be scared. You know what I mean? I'm going to go see it at night. You know what I mean? I want that experience. Evil Dead Rise kind of, gave that to me. The hole in the ground as well. I definitely want it. I definitely want it with the Mummy. So I hope for more great things to see from you in the coming years.
Thank you so much, Chris. It was a pleasure talking to you.